Part 1. Secrets of the Indus Valley Civilization. You didn't know, but tonight, I want you to drift with me into the forgotten world of the Indus Valley Civilization. And here's the real curiosity: they built huge, perfectly organized cities, and then, one day, they just disappeared. No dramatic war records, no heroic last stands, just silence. And we still don't know exactly why. So dim the lights, get cozy, because we're about to explore one of history's strangest stories, one where the people left us sewers and unicorn carvings, but not a single word we can read. Now picture this. It's around 2600 BCE. Egypt is stacking pyramids. Mesopotamia is writing down who owes them goats. And along the Indus River, people are quietly out engineering everyone. They're building cities on grids, straight roads, standardized bricks, all the same size, everywhere. And the wildest part, there's no giant palace. No arrogant king carving his name into stone every 5 minutes. It's almost like they said, we don't need one megalomaniac running things. Let's just agree on brick sizes instead. Of course, did they really have no rulers? Or were their leaders just modest, invisible in the archaeology? That mystery is still dangling there. And that's the first thread to keep you curious, because as we go, you'll see how the Indus Valley left us order, but not much personality. Let's float down one of those ancient streets. It's clean, straight, and lined with houses. Some are 2 stories. Many have private wells. And get this, toilets connected to covered drains. That's right. In 2600 BC, people here had better sanitation than medieval Europe ever dreamed of. So while London was still centuries away from just chuck it in the street, the Indus people were casually running sewage systems. Makes you wonder, what else did they figure out that we've forgotten? And they weren't just practical, they were also a little quirky. You see, they were obsessed with making tiny carved seals, inch-wide squares. Some show animals, some show strange symbols no one can read. And yes, some show unicorns. Well, awkward, cow-like unicorns. But still, now here's the retention hook. Nobody has ever cracked their script. For over a century, scholars have tried. Is it an early Dravidian language? Something totally lost? We still don't know, which means that every seal could be a royal decree, or a receipt for lentils. We'll never be sure. And isn't that the perfect bedtime puzzle? But maybe you're waiting for the dark part. Surely every ancient civilization has its dysfunction. And here's the odd thing. The Indus Valley doesn't give us the usual chaos. No kings smiting enemies. No temples dripping with sacrifices. Just calm, well-organized streets. Almost too calm. Suspiciously calm. Because archaeologists did find skeletons in Mohenjo-Daro, lying in strange positions in the streets. For decades, people thought this was proof of invasion, maybe Aryan warriors storming the city. But recent studies suggest otherwise. So, was it war? Disease? Climate collapse? The truth is, we don't know. But don't drift off just yet. We'll wander through those theories in a little while. And since no civilization is complete without fashion, the Indus men favored cloaks draped over one shoulder. Women wore elaborate jewelry, beads, bangles, even headdresses. And the most famous figurine of them all? The bronze dancing girl. She's tiny, just a few inches tall, standing with one hand on her hip, like she's been waiting for 4,000 years for someone to notice her confidence. Honestly, she looks cooler than most of us on Instagram. But the centerpiece of their city was the Great Bath, a massive pool lined with bricks and sealed with tar so it wouldn't leak. Was it for rituals, purification, or did the people of Mohenjo-Daro just enjoy an evening soak? We'll never be certain. But if you've ever felt smug about your neighborhood having a community pool, sorry, the Indus Valley beat you to it by 4 millennia. So here's where we leave part 1. A civilization that gave us plumbing, unicorn seals, dancing figurines, and mysterious baths. And yet, by 1900 BC, it all started to crumble. The drains clogged, the bricks got sloppy, the rivers shifted, and one by one, the great cities emptied out. Why? Well, that's the thread we'll gently tug on in the next section. Because every theory, whether climate, migration, or slow decline, reveals another strange detail about these people who vanished so quietly. So don't wander off just yet. The Indus Valley still has secrets left to whisper. Part 2. The seals, the script, and the vanishing cities. So, where were we? Ah yes, drains, unicorn seals, and a tiny bronze girl sassier than most of history's kings. But let's lean in closer, because the Indus Valley didn't just leave us plumbing and fashion tips. They also left us one of the great unsolved puzzles of archaeology, their writing system. And by writing system, I mean a bunch of very short inscriptions. Seriously, most are just 4 or 5 characters long. Imagine if all of our written history was preserved only in the form of car license plates and bathroom graffiti. That's basically what we've got. The mystery script now. Historians have spent over a century staring at these little squiggles. Some say it's the ancestor of Dravidian languages. Others think it's Proto-Sanskrit. And a few cynics suggest, brace yourself, that maybe it isn't even a language. Maybe it's just fancy symbols, like ancient logos. Which is both hilarious and depressing. Imagine future archaeologists digging up our world, finding Nike swooshes and McDonald's arches, and assuming those were our sacred scriptures. That could literally be what we're doing to the Indus seals. And here's the curiosity hook. If we could read this script, we might finally know who ruled these cities. Were they kings, councils, trade guilds, or was it just a really strict Hoa? But until someone cracks it, we're left with unicorn doodles and 3-letter words that may or may not mean pottery tax, trade, beads, and boats. Now, let's drift out of the city for a moment. Because the Indus Valley wasn't just minding its own business, they were part of a huge trade network. We've found Indus seals in Mesopotamia. That means their merchants were shipping goods thousands of miles away. What goods? Oh, the usual ancient flex. Beads, cotton textiles, ivory, maybe even spices. Fun fact, the Indus people may have been the first to spin cotton. Yes, your t-shirt owes its existence to Bronze Age South Asia. So next time you pull on a comfy cotton hoodie, whisper a little, "Thank you," to Mohenjo-Daro. And they weren't landlocked either. Evidence suggests they had boats sailing along the Arabian Sea. Some archaeologists even argue they built the world's first true dockyard at Lothal in modern Gujarat. Picture it, rows of ships, merchants haggling over beads, the faint smell of spices, all while Europe was still figuring out which end of the stick to sharpen for farming. Social life. Who ran the show? Okay, back to that awkward question, who was in charge? Because this is one of the strangest things about the Indus Valley. Most civilizations love leaving receipts for their leaders' egos. Mesopotamian kings were like, Here's me smiting my enemies for the gods. Egyptian pharaohs covered entire pyramids with their names, just in case you forgot. But the Indus? Nothing. No giant statues of rulers. No royal tombs. Not even a world's greatest king mug, which leaves us to possibilities. Maybe they had rulers, but they just didn't carve them in stone. Or maybe they really were more collective, ruled by councils, merchants, or priests who didn't demand 30-foot-tall statues of themselves. If it's the second option, that makes them shockingly modern, almost Scandinavian in their quiet egalitarianism. But let's not romanticize too much. They probably had social classes. We see wealth in jewelry hoards, differences in houses, and specialized trades. Still, the lack of one giant ego carved into granite is refreshing. The weird art now. We can't leave their art out of this bedtime wander, because if you're expecting grand murals of battles, nope. Instead, we get tiny seals with animals, figurines of women, maybe fertility goddesses, and occasionally, something that looks suspiciously like early yoga poses. There's one famous seal that shows a figure sitting cross-legged, surrounded by animals. Some scholars call it Proto-Shiva, a possible early version of the Hindu god. Or maybe it's just some guy meditating while cows watched. Again, mystery. But what's striking is how quiet the art feels. No massive war propaganda, no violent conquest scenes, just animals, goddesses, dancers, and unicorns. Almost like the civilization itself, peaceful, ordered, and a little opaque. The Great Decline, alright. Let's touch the uncomfortable part, the collapse. Because every time you build something too perfect, history loves to knock it down. By around 1900 BC, the cracks show. Literally, buildings are sloppier, bricks lose their standard sizes. The beautiful drains clog up. It's as if the urban planners all collectively quit. Why? Well, climate change is the lead suspect. Studies of river sediments suggest the Indus River may have shifted course. The monsoons weakened, crops failed, and when your society depends on agriculture tied to river floods, that's kind of a deal breaker. So, people start moving out. The giant cities slowly empty. By 1700 BCE, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro are shells of their former selves. No dramatic battle, no conquering empire sweeping in. Just a slow fade into silence, which is almost sadder, isn't it? Because we humans love epic collapses. Rome sacked by barbarians, Troy in flames, but the Indus, they just dwindled away, like a candle burning down. Rediscovery, from bricks to railroads. Here's the ironic twist that ties it all back. For thousands of years, these cities sat buried, forgotten. Then, in the 1850s, British engineers building railways in India stumbled across piles of old bricks. Perfectly baked, sturdy bricks. So naturally, they did the sensible thing. They used them to build railroads. Yes, Mohenjo-Daro was partly dismantled by 19th century train construction. History's great city planning achievement recycled into railway ballast. And only later did archaeologists realize what they'd paved over. Imagine being the ghost of an Indus Valley bricklayer, watching your perfect standardized brick used under a Victorian train. Equal parts insult and cosmic comedy. Why it still matters. So why does this matter? Why should we care about a civilization that didn't bother leaving us a single king's name? Because the Indus Valley reminds us that not all history is loud. Some societies thrive on order, sanitation, and quiet innovation. They weren't perfect, they collapsed. After all, but they built something so advanced, it still shocks us today. And they left just enough mystery, unreadable seals, unicorn cows, vanished rulers to keep us awake at night. Or, hopefully in your case, to help you drift off while wondering. So let's leave part 2 here. We've seen their writing that no one can read, their trade routes stretching to Mesopotamia, their mysterious art, and their quiet fade into dust. But don't roll over yet, because in the next part, we're going to zoom in on the strangest human details: the skeletons, the diets, the diseases, the quirky figurines, and what everyday life might have actually smelled like in a city of 40,000 with no deodorant aisle. And trust me, you'll never look at Bronze Age beads the same way again. Part 3. Food, Bones, and the Quiet Life of the Indus People. So far, we've wandered their streets, peeked at their drains, and squinted at their unreadable seals. But what about the actual people who lived here? Because cities aren't just bricks and baths. They're smells, meals, gossip, and the quiet little details of daily life. And when you zoom in on those details, the Indus Valley starts to feel less like an abstract mystery, and more like a real community where people ate lentils, wore too many bangles, and probably argued over the neighbor's cow wandering into their courtyard. The diet. What's for dinner? 2500 BCE. Let's start with food, because no civilization can survive without it, and also because thinking about ancient diets makes us secretly grateful for pizza delivery. So, what did the Indus people eat? Well, the basics were grains. Lots of barley and wheat, some millet, and yes, rice, though it wasn't their main crop just yet. They also grew peas, sesame, dates, and get-ready cotton. Not for eating, of course, but still impressive. The Indus were basically the world's first cotton farmers. For protein, they had cattle, sheep, goats, and water buffalo. And fish, lots of fish. Archaeologists have found fish bones in heaps, which means riverside fish markets were probably buzzing. Picture it, a Bronze Age fishmonger yelling, "Fresh catch of the Indus. 2 seals for a catfish." Curiosity point here, did they eat beef? This one's debated. Cattle were central to their culture, possibly sacred. But bone remains shows signs of butchery, so maybe they did sometimes eat beef, maybe not. If they did, it was probably with less barbecue sauce than you'd like. The kitchen setup, and how did they cook? Clay ovens, hearths, flat baking trays. Archaeologists have found round griddles that look suspiciously like the ancestors of the modern chapati pan. So yes, your roti might trace its family tree back for 1,000 years. They also brewed beer. Of course, they did. Almost every ancient society figured out alcohol early on, because once you've solved sewage and drainage, the next logical step is, let's see if we can ferment barley and forget our problems. Beads, bangles, and bling now. Step away from the kitchen and into the wardrobe. If there's one thing the Indus people loved, it was jewelry. Beads, carved from steatite, carnelian, lazuli. Shell bangles stacked high on wrists. Gold ornaments for those who could afford them. Even kids were buried with bead necklaces, which is a Bronze Age way of saying, everyone gets accessories. And here's the curiosity hook. Archaeologists once found a whole workshop in Lothal dedicated just to bead making. Imagine rows of artisans drilling tiny holes in shiny stones, day after day. It's strangely modern, like ancient Etsy shop with terrible shipping times. Skeleton stories. Now, if you really want to know about a people, you look at their bones. And the skeletons from Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro have some interesting stories to tell. For one, many were short. Average height? Around 5'6" for men, 5'2" for women. Sturdy, healthy in some ways, but with signs of wear. Arthritis from heavy labor. Broken bones that healed badly. And then there's the darker stuff. Some skeletons show evidence of leprosy and tuberculosis, the earliest known cases in human history. So, congratulations to the Indus Valley. They were pioneers in both sanitation and infectious disease. Balance in all things, I suppose. But what's striking is how few signs of war we see. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, where skeletons show mass trauma from battles, the Indus people don't seem to have been hacking each other apart en masse. Maybe they really were more peaceful, or maybe they just outsourced their violence to disease instead. Children of the Indus, let's not forget the kids. Because if you were born in Mohenjo-Daro, your childhood would have been, well, dusty. Children probably helped with chores early on, tending animals, fetching water, learning crafts. But they also had toys. Yes, toys. Clay rattles, little carts with wheels, miniature animals. One famous find is a tiny terracotta monkey that could slide down a string. Basically a Bronze Age action figure. And isn't that strangely comforting? To know that even 4,000 years ago, parents were like, here, play with this toy while I go stir the lentils. Religion or something like it, alright. Let's tiptoe into beliefs. Because every society has rituals, and the Indus Valley is no exception. We've already mentioned the Great Bath, probably ritual purification. We've also seen figurines of goddesses, maybe fertility cults. And then there's that famous Proto-Shiva seal with the cross-legged figure. Do these mean they were early Hindus? Careful, that's a hot debate. Some scholars say yes, it's continuity. Others say no, it's coincidence. The truth is, we don't know, and maybe we never will, which, again, makes it the perfect bedtime puzzle. The smells of the city. Let's pause and just imagine Mohenjo-Daro for a moment, not in silence, but in senses. What would it have smelled like? Probably a mix of baked bread, fish, spices, smoke from hearth fires, layered with less pleasant aromas from animals, tannery pits, and yes, even their fancy sewage drains. Because no matter how advanced your plumbing, 40,000 people in close quarters smells human. What would you hear? Vendors shouting in markets, the clatter of pottery, the squeak of wooden carts, children chasing each other through courtyards, maybe a faint tune from a flute or drum. And suddenly, the Indus Valley feels less mysterious, more alive. A quiet fade, but all this daily life had an expiration date. As the climate shifted, crops failed, and rivers changed, people trickled away. Villages replaced cities. The toy monkey stopped sliding down strings. The bead workshops went silent. By the time later cultures like the Vedic Aryans wrote their hymns, the Indus cities were already ruins. And their script, whatever it said, was unreadable even then. Which means that the people who once lived in these neat little houses, cooked barley bread, and stacked their wrists with bangles, vanished into anonymity. And that's where we'll gently close part 3. We've wandered through their kitchens, their wardrobes, their skeletons, even their childhood toys. And yet, they still slip away from us. Quiet, mysterious, unfinished. But don't drift off just yet, because in the next part, we'll look at how this forgotten civilization might connect to later cultures, the echoes of Indus traditions in South Asia today, the genetic footprints they left behind, and how the debate over their identity still sparks arguments among historians. And of course, we'll keep circling back to that tantalizing question: who were they really? Part 4 goes, and afterlives of the Indus Valley. We've wandered their kitchens. We've peeked at their skeletons. We've even admired their questionable bead collecting obsession. But the Indus Valley didn't just vanish into thin air one day. Civilizations don't work like light switches. They fade, scatter, dissolve, but they almost always leave traces. So the question is, what survived? What echoes of the Indus can still be found in South Asia today? Let's drift into the afterlife of this civilization, where mystery collides with continuity. The Great Vanishing Act. First, let's tackle the big mystery. Why did the Indus Valley collapse? If you flip through history books, you'll see a few theories tossed around like darts. Climate change. Evidence shows rivers dried up, monsoons weakened, farming got harder. And when your barley fails for a few seasons in a row, you don't keep building brick cities, you downsize. River shifts. The mighty Saraswati River, now mostly vanished, may have changed course, stranding whole settlements without water. Invasions? Some older scholars blamed the arrival of Indo-Aryans, but newer evidence suggests it wasn't a violent overthrow, more a slow decline. Trade breakdown. With Mesopotamia collapsing into its own troubles, the Indus may have lost vital economic links. The reality? Probably a messy cocktail of all of the above. Cities shrink. Populations scatter into villages. Urban life fades away like the end of a dream. Continuity or break? Here's where things get interesting. Did the Indus people just disappear, or did they merge into later South Asian cultures? Genetic studies suggest continuity. Many modern South Asians carry ancestry from Indus Valley populations, blended with later migrations. So if you're eating lentils in Lahore or chapati in Gujarat, you might, without realizing, be echoing a Bronze Age dinner. But it's not just DNA, it's culture. Some archaeologists argue that aspects of Indus life quietly flowed into later Vedic traditions. For example, sacred bathing. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro looks suspiciously like the ancestor of ritual bathing in Hinduism. Bull symbols from Indus seals to Nandi the bull in later Hindu mythology. The thread feels familiar. Yoga-like postures. That Proto-Shiva seal, cross-legged, surrounded by animals. Is it early yoga, or just a guy sitting weirdly? Scholars argue. Of course, the danger here is cherry picking. We want to see continuity, so we draw lines where maybe none exist. But still, the echoes are hard to ignore. The script that refuses to speak. Let's circle back to their script for a second. Because if the Indus Valley had left us readable texts, this entire section would be boring. We just say, here's what they believed. Here's how they lived. Here's why they declined. Done and dusted. Instead, we're left with tantalizing half hints. The signs are everywhere on seals, pottery, tools. Some scholars think it wasn't even a full language, but more like symbols or tokens. Others argue it had grammar, syntax, everything you'd expect in writing. Attempts to decode it are endless. Some claim it's early Dravidian, others suggest it's connected to Sanskrit. Some fringe folks even argue it's alien code because, of course they do. The truth? No Rosetta Stone has been found, and until it is, the script remains a locked door. A door that keeps historians awake at night, and helps us drift off to sleep. Because mystery is the ultimate lullaby. The aftertaste in the landscape, even if the people scattered, their cities left footprints. Villages that replaced Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa often recycled their bricks. Later, farmers plowed through Indus streets without even knowing it. The landscape holds the bones of their world, quietly repurposed. Even river names echo them. Some link the lost Saraswati River of the Rigveda to Indus geography. Was the Saraswati real? Was it the Ghaggar Hakra? Was it just poetic imagination? Another bedtime puzzle. The debate that never ends. Here's where historians get fiery. Ask 10 experts, who were the Indus people? And you'll get 11 answers. Some say they were the ancestors of modern Dravidian speakers, pointing to linguistic links, cultural echoes. Others argue they merged into the broader Indo-Aryan world that followed. Some insist we can't know until the script is cracked. And beneath all this academic squabbling is something deeper: identity. Because the Indus Valley isn't just ancient history, it's cultural heritage. Modern nations India, Pakistan both claim them as part of their story. And why wouldn't they? If you had the world's oldest urban civilization in your backyard, you'd want bragging rights too. So the debates rage on, not just in dusty journals, but in classrooms, politics, even internet forums. It's strange to think a civilization that vanished 3,500 years ago can still spark arguments today. The comfort of mystery, but maybe, just maybe, the not knowing is the point. If the Indus script were cracked tomorrow, if we suddenly had full translations of their hymns and tax receipts, they'd lose some of their dreamlike quality. They'd become like Mesopotamia, fascinating but knowable. Instead, the Indus remain half visible, familiar, yet alien. And that's why, as we drift through their afterlife, the echo feels so soft, like hearing faint music through a closed door. You know it's there, but you can't quite catch the tune. The gentle fade into dreams. So, where does that leave us? The Indus Valley may be gone, but their fingerprints linger in food, in ritual, in the soil beneath South Asian cities today. Their legacy is not a single line of descent, but a quiet blending into the background hum of history. And maybe that's enough, because as much as we crave neat endings, history rarely gives them. Sometimes civilizations don't leave us epics or kings or monuments. Sometimes they just leave us beads, drains, and questions. And those questions echo louder than answers ever could. And that closes part 4. We've wandered through their collapse, their possible legacies, their script, and the modern debates that swirl around them. But don't close your eyes yet. In the next part, we'll gently zoom out even further, comparing the Indus Valley to its neighbors, Mesopotamia, Egypt, China. What makes the Indus unique? What makes it strangely similar? And why did it take so long for the world to even notice they existed?